Welcome to Starbound. My name's Aram, and I'll be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new episodes of Sunspire Academy and Freyrin and Remike. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes and future series, tap Join below to become a Starbound member. Now, let's get into today's story. The teleportation pad whined, sparked, and then belched a cloud of ionized particles that smelled faintly of burnt toast. When the haze cleared, Mika Hargreaves stood in its center, swaying slightly. Her stomach lurched, her ears popped, and the world tilted at a nauseating angle. She grabbed her duffel bag to steady herself, only to discover that the duffel bag was, in fact, levitating about 8 inches above the pad's surface.
"Oh,"
she mumbled, fighting another wave of queasiness.
"That's new." "First interstellar transport?"
asked a voice that sounded like someone gargling wind chimes. Mika blinked away stars from her vision to find a tall, thin creature regarding her with 3 vertically aligned eyes. Its skin was so transparent she could see the slow pulse of blue-tinted fluids moving through its body. The alien wore what appeared to be a standard-issue administrator's uniform, if standard issue came with personal shield generators, which this one most certainly did. The blue energy barrier hummed between them.
Yes,"
Mika answered, then realized she was still clutching empty air where her bag should be. She grabbed the floating duffel and tried not to look as disoriented as she felt.
"First time off Earth, actually."
The administrator flinched at the word Earth and tapped something on a wrist device that made the shield pulse brighter.
"I am Administrator Plex,"
it said, taking a deliberate step backward.
"Welcome to Galactic Preparatory Academy. Your presence here is quite historic." Thanks?"
Mika tucked a wild strand of curly auburn hair behind her ear, feeling both self-conscious about her appearance and confused by the administrator's obvious nervousness.
"I'm Mika Hargreaves." "Yes, the human."
Administrator Plex said this in the same tone someone might say, the unexploded bomb.
"Follow me, please, at a distance of at least 6 feet.
As they walked through the gleaming white corridors of what would be her school for the next year, Mika tried to absorb it all. The hallways twisted in ways that seemed to defy ordinary geometry. Gravity shifted subtly from section to section. Through transparent walls, she glimpsed classrooms filled with beings of every conceivable shape, size, and state of matter. Some floated in tanks, others slithered along the floor, and a few appeared to exist partially in dimensions she couldn't quite see.
"Oh, this is so cool,"
Mika whispered, momentarily forgetting her discomfort. Administrator Plex glanced back at her, all 3 eyes blinking in sequence.
"Yes, well, we pride ourselves on accommodating all galactic citizens, even those from challenging environments."
The way Plex said challenging made Mika frown. Sure, Earth wasn't perfect, what with the pollution, politics, and the occasional super hurricane, but it wasn't exactly a post-apocalyptic wasteland.
"Here we are."
Plex stopped before a door that rippled like water.
"Your dormitory assignment. The housing coordinator will take over from here. Remember to disclose any specific environmental requirements that might, prevent unfortunate incidents."
Before Mika could ask what unfortunate incidents meant, Administrator Plex had scuttled away, shield generators still humming. Miss Trill, the housing coordinator, was about 4 feet tall, with moist amphibious skin and bulbous eyes that protruded from either side of her head. She wore what appeared to be a constantly dripping wetsuit and smelled vaguely of pond water.
"So, you're the Earth student,"
she burbled, flipping through a holographic display that hovered above her webbed fingers.
"Such an honor. Very brave program, yes indeed." "Thank you,"
Mika said, increasingly aware that people kept talking about Earth as if it were noteworthy in some way she didn't understand.
"I'm excited to be here. Of course, of course.
Miss Trill nodded vigorously, water droplets flying from her skin.
You'll be bunking with Zrixel, very adaptable roommate, top of her class in xenotolerance.
Miss Trill led Mika down a hallway where each door seemed to be made of a different material. One of solid light, another of living vegetation, and one that appeared to be a controlled black hole.
Here we are.
Miss Trill stopped at a perfectly ordinary-looking metal door.
Zrixel is already inside. Do try to make a good impression. First Earth student and all that.
The door slid open, and Mika stepped into a standard-looking dorm room, albeit one designed for beings with wildly different requirements. One half was clearly set up for a human, bed, desk, storage unit, while the other contained what looked like a cross between a hammock and a beehive hanging from the ceiling. Inside this structure, Mika could see movement. 6 limbs unfolded as a creature about her size descended on a thread of silk. Zrixel had an exoskeleton that caught the light in rainbows of color, not unlike an oil slick on water. Her head was dominated by large eyes that reminded Mika of a dragonfly's, constantly shifting and refracting.
Hi.
Mika offered her most friendly smile.
I'm Mika. Guess we're roommates?
Zrixel froze. All 6 of her limbs went rigid. Her eyes seemed to expand, and a high-pitched whine emanated from somewhere in her thorax.
You're from Earth?
The words came out as a panicked buzz.
Yeah. Portland, Oregon. United America specifically.
Zrixel backed away so fast she bumped into the wall.
Miss Trill?
She called out, her voice rising to a frantic pitch.
Miss Trill, there's been a mistake!
The housing coordinator poked her head back into the room.
Is there a problem? You didn't say she was from Earth!
Zrixel's antennae quivered violently.
I can't room with a Deathworlder?
Mika's jaw dropped.
A what? Oh dear.
Miss Trill croaked, looking uncomfortable.
Zrixel, we discussed— No.
Zrixel was now skittering up the wall, retreating to her hanging nest.
My parents specifically stated in my enrollment contract that I wasn't to be exposed to the Class 5 environmental hazards, and humans are walking Class 5 hazards. They leak bacteria, they have exposed flesh, they consume toxins for pleasure.
Mika looked down at her hands. She'd washed them before leaving Earth. They looked perfectly normal to her, just a bit freckled from all the hiking she'd done last summer.
I'm not hazardous,
she protested, but Zrixel was already stuffing items into a carrying case.
I'll submit a formal transfer request,
Zrixel announced, shooting past Mika so quickly that she felt a breeze.
No offense intended to your species,
she added from the doorway.
But I'm rather attached to being alive.
And with that, Mika's roommate was gone. Miss Trill sighed, a sound like water gurgling down a drain.
I apologize, Mika. We should have anticipated this reaction, though I expected more from her. Zrixel species evolved on a perfectly controlled environmental orb. They're sensitive. To what?
Mika asked, utterly confused.
I took all the required vaccines before coming here. I'm not carrying any diseases. It's not that, specifically.
Miss Trill looked increasingly uncomfortable.
It's more about what you represent. Earth is— well, there's no delicate way to put this. Earth is classified as a Class 5 Deathworld, dearie.
Mika blinked.
What now? A planet so inherently dangerous that most galactic species would perish there within hours. Extreme temperature variations, aggressive atmospheric composition, harmful radiation levels, abundant pathogens, unpredictable weather patterns, active geology. Earth has it all. But it's just home,
Mika said weakly.
Indeed,
Miss Trill nodded sagely.
Which makes you rather remarkable, if a bit terrifying for your fellow students. Not to worry, though. We'll assign you a private room, for safety reasons.
As Miss Trill led her to her new accommodation, Mika felt a sinking sensation in her stomach that had nothing to do with teleportation sickness. The next morning, Mika sat across from Mr. Yorn, her guidance counselor, a fuzzy being with 4 eyes and what appeared to be a constantly twitching nose. He looked like what might happen if a teddy bear mated with a fruit bat. Unlike Administrator Plex, he wasn't using a shield, though he did keep a nervous grip on his desk, which Mika suspected might double as a barrier if necessary. "Now then," Mr. Yorn said, examining her transcript through specialized goggles. "Your academic record from Earth is impressive."
Thanks!
Mika brightened.
I was top of my class in science and math. I also took an advanced placement exobiology course once Earth joined the Federation.
Yes, very commendable," Mr. Yorn muttered, though his tone suggested otherwise. "However, you must understand that educational standards vary widely across the galaxy, particularly for species from challenging environments." There was that word again. Challenging.
I don't understand,
Mika said. Mr. Yorn's nose twitched rapidly. "Well, you see, when a species evolves in a world where basic survival consumes most of their evolutionary resources, their educational development often lags behind. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Many Deathworld species eventually catch up." Mika's face grew hot.
Are you saying you think I'm stupid because I'm from Earth?
"Not stupid." Mr. Yorn looked genuinely horrified. "Never that. Simply differently prioritized. Your brain evolved to help you survive acid rain and predator attacks, not to solve trans-dimensional calculus."
I got a perfect score on my Earth mathematics exams,
Mika pointed out, trying to keep her voice level. "Yes, Earth mathematics," Mr. Yorn nodded patronizingly. "Very good for what they are, but we'll start you with the remedial curriculum. To be safe, you can always advance if you show aptitude." By the time Mika left Mr. Yorn's office with her class schedule, she was seething. Remedial classes. She'd been reading college-level textbooks since she was 12. Her parents, both university professors, had always encouraged her academic curiosity, and now she was being treated like she was intellectually stunted because her planet had seasons? Only her stubborn pride kept her from contacting Earth and demanding to go home. She'd show them. She'd show all of them what a Deathworlder could do. Professor Zilk's classroom looked like a cross between an amphitheater and an aquarium. Tiered seating surrounded a central platform where a floating transparent sphere contained what appeared to be a mass of gently pulsing tentacles suspended in blue gel. A voice emanated from speakers around the sphere. "Welcome, students, to Xenobiology 101. I am Professor Zilk." Mika took a seat in the middle row, trying to ignore how the other students shifted away from her. By now, word had spread through the school about the human from Earth. She kept her eyes forward, refusing to show how much their reaction hurt. Today, Professor Zilk's tentacles rippled with what might have been excitement. We begin our exploration of the galaxy's most dangerous environments and their evolutionary monstrosities. A holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing a familiar blue-green sphere. "Earth," Professor Zilk announced, his voice now tinged with what sounded like both fear and fascination. "One of only 6 known Class 5 Deathworlds to produce intelligent life." The hologram zoomed in, cycling through images of Earth's most extreme environments. The cracked, parched surface of Death Valley, the wind-swept, icy summit of Mount Everest, the crushing darkness of the Mariana Trench. On most habitable worlds, Professor Zilk continued, environmental conditions remain relatively stable. Temperature variations rarely exceed 20 degrees. Atmospheric pressure, gravity, and radiation levels maintain consistent patterns. Not so on Earth, where a creature might freeze to death at night in the same location where it might boil alive during the day. The hologram shifted to display Earth's wildlife. A great white shark, mouth open to reveal rows of serrated teeth. A Komodo dragon, saliva dripping from its venomous jaws. A Bengal tiger, muscles bunched as it prepared to pounce. Earth's apex predators have evolved with extraordinary offensive capabilities, Professor Zilk narrated as the images cycled. And yet, somehow, against all odds, these creatures are not the dominant species. The hologram changed again to show a human being, a generic anatomical model. Humans, Professor Zilk's voice took on a slightly higher pitch, have conquered their death world not through superior physical abilities, but through a terrifying combination of endurance, adaptability, and cooperative problem-solving. Mika squirmed in her seat as dozens of alien eyes turned to stare at her. The average human, Professor Zilk continued, can survive temperature ranges that would kill most sentient species. They can lose significant quantities of blood and continue functioning. They can break major bones and still fight. They can ingest substances that would be lethal to most galactic citizens and experience them as merely spicy or intoxicating. A ripple of nervous murmurs spread through the classroom. For today's discussion, Professor Zilk said, we will examine how Earth's various death zones have shaped human physiology and behavior. Who can identify the most lethal natural environment on Earth? A student with bioluminescent skin raised a tendril. The deep ocean trenches. The pressure would crush most beings. An excellent example, Professor Zilk agreed. The pressure at Earth's deepest ocean point would reduce most of us to organic paste, yet humans have developed technology to explore even these depths. Other suggestions?
The polar regions,
offered a student with crystalline features that fractured light into rainbow patterns.
Temperatures cold enough to solidify gases.
Indeed, nodded Professor Zilk. Earth has regions so cold that exposed flesh freezes in minutes, yet indigenous human populations have survived there for thousands of years. Any other?
The deserts,
Mika said without raising her hand. She was getting tired of being discussed like a dangerous lab specimen.
The Sahara can reach 136 degrees Fahrenheit during the day and drop below freezing at night. Almost no water, constant sandstorms, and intense UV radiation.
The classroom went utterly silent. Quite right. Professor Zilk's tentacles contracted slightly. And have you experienced such an environment personally? Mika smiled thinly.
I've hiked through the Sonoran Desert with my family every spring since I was 8. It's beautiful when the cacti bloom.
A student in the front row, a small gelatinous blob with eye stalks, made a sound like a deflating balloon and slid off its seat onto the floor in a dead faint. Professor Zilk's containment sphere bobbled slightly. I see. How educational. His tentacles swirled in what Mika was beginning to recognize as agitation. Perhaps you would care to share other personal experiences with extreme Earth environments? For the remainder of the class, Mika found herself the center of horrified attention as she described perfectly ordinary Earth activities. Swimming in the ocean. You voluntarily immerse yourself in a medium you cannot breathe. Camping during a thunderstorm.
Atmospheric electrical discharge is powerful enough to vaporize trees.
And eating her mother's extra spicy chili. You ingest capsaicin for pleasure. By the time class ended, 3 more students had fainted, and Professor Zilk had checked the integrity of his containment sphere no fewer than 12 times. As Mika gathered her things, she overheard whispers.
Monster from a nightmare world. Eats things that fight back. Doesn't have an exoskeleton.
She left the classroom with her head held high, but inside, a hollow feeling was growing. She'd come to GPA excited to meet new species, learn about the wider galaxy, to make friends from different worlds. Instead, she was being treated like some kind of terrifying anomaly. In the corridor, a small group of students shrank against the wall as she passed. One of them was wearing what appeared to be a hazmat suit. Mika walked faster, blinking back tears. "Is it true you can regrow your limbs?" Mika looked up from her lunch, a bland, nutritionally optimized paste that was apparently considered suitable for most oxygen-breathing species, to find a small, furry alien standing by her otherwise empty table. He resembled a hamster that had been stretched vertically and given oversized eyes that took up most of his face. Unlike the other students, he wasn't maintaining a safety distance or wearing protective gear.
No?
Mika said, surprised to be addressed directly.
That's not a human thing.
Oh. The alien's whiskers drooped slightly. What about drinking poison for fun? Is that real? Mika couldn't help but smile.
Well, some humans drink alcohol, which is technically toxic, but it's not exactly poison.
Fascinating. The alien's eyes gleamed with genuine interest. I'm Maz, by the way. Xenobiology and extreme environments major.
Mika, human and apparent walking disaster.
Maz's nose twitched in what might have been amusement. Mind if I sit? I have so many questions about Earth. Is it true you have storms that can lift entire buildings? For the first time since arriving, Mika felt a glimmer of genuine connection. Someone who didn't run away screaming, who actually wanted to talk to her.
Tornadoes? Yeah, they're real. We get them in the Midwest mostly. I've never seen one up close, though.
Maz settled across from her, tail curling around his chair leg for stability. And you have microorganisms living inside you? Billions of them. On purpose.
Our microbiome, yeah. They help us digest food and fight off harmful bacteria.
Amazing, Maz breathed. Most species would consider that a severe infection. They continued talking throughout lunch. Maz had thousands of questions about Earth, and Mika found herself describing things she'd always taken for granted. Thunderstorms, sunburns, allergies, to an audience that found them utterly extraordinary. You know, Maz said as they were finishing up, the Xenobiology Club is doing a field trip to Lunex 3 next week. It's a small moon with some interesting biomes. Nothing as extreme as Earth, of course, but still pretty neat. You should come.
Really?
Mika brightened.
You think they'd let me?
Are you kidding? Professor Zilk is the faculty advisor, and he's been talking about you non-stop. Besides, who wouldn't want a Deathworlder along on a potentially dangerous expedition? Mika wasn't entirely sure if Maz was joking, but the invitation itself meant more than she could express. Someone wanted her around. Someone saw her as more than just a terrifying curiosity.
Count me in,
she said. The research vessel was compact, utilitarian, and equipped with enough safety features to survive almost anything. Professor Zilk's containment sphere hovered near the front, surrounded by holographic displays showing detailed scans of their destination. Lunex 3, Professor Zilk announced as the 12 selected students settled into their seats. A fascinating small moon with unusually diverse biomes for its size. We'll be exploring the floating spore forests and cave systems today. Mika noticed 2 uniformed security officers standing near the exit. One of them kept glancing in her direction, hand resting on what was unmistakably a stun baton. She pretended not to notice, focusing instead on the excited buzz of conversation around her. Maz bounced in the seat next to her. This is going to be amazing. The cave systems have these bioluminescent fungi that communicate through light patterns.
That sounds beautiful,
Mika said, genuinely intrigued. They're also mildly hallucinogenic if you breathe their spores, Maz added with a mischievous twitch of his whiskers. As the ship lifted off, Mika caught fragments of hushed conversation behind her. Why they brought the human. Probably wants to study how it reacts. Or they use fungi as recreational drugs. Mika sighed and turned to look out the viewport. The academy receded below them, a sprawling complex of gleaming structures set against an alien landscape of purple vegetation and orange skies. In another context, it would have been exhilarating, her first view of an alien world from above. Instead, she felt like a specimen being transported for observation. "Don't mind them," Maz whispered, noticing her expression. "They're just nervous because they've never met a Deathworlder before. Once they get to know you, they'll see you're not going to eat them or anything."
Is that actually a concern?
Mika asked, half joking. Maz shrugged. "There are stories about other Class 5 species, not humans specifically. The Crawl supposedly consume the brain stems of their enemies to absorb their knowledge."
That's horrifying.
Right? That's why no one wants to take classes with them. But humans don't do anything like that, right?
No!
Mika exclaimed, then lowered her voice.
No, we definitely don't eat other sentient beings.
Mika strategically chose not to mention cannibalism. "See? You're already less terrifying than the Crawl." Somehow, Mika didn't find that particularly reassuring. Lunex 3 was beautiful. The floating spore forests were exactly as advertised, massive, puffy structures that drifted through the low-gravity atmosphere like dandelion seeds the size of buses. They gave off a soft lavender glow and released tiny spores that sparkled in the sunlight. Professor Zilk led them through a well-established path, his containment sphere now equipped with external manipulator arms that he used to collect samples. The security officers flanked the group, eyes constantly scanning for threats. "The spore forests serve as habitats for numerous small flying creatures," Professor Zilk explained, as a swarm of what looked like miniature manta rays soared overhead. "Their life cycles are interconnected in fascinating ways." The students oohed and ahed appropriately, recording observations on their datapads. Mika noticed that while everyone had clustered around Professor Zilk, they'd managed to leave a conspicuous empty space around her. Only Maz walked beside her, his oversized eyes wide with wonder as he took in the alien landscape. "Next," Professor Zilk announced, "we'll explore the cave systems in the eastern ridge. Remember to activate your breathing filters once we're inside." The cave entrance was a jagged slash in a cliff face of striated purple stone. Cool air wafted out, carrying scents of mineral deposits and the faint, sweet odor of the bioluminescent fungi Maz had mentioned. Professor Zilk directed his sphere through the opening, illuminating the path with embedded lights. Inside, the cave opened into a spectacular chamber. The ceiling arched high above them, dripping with stalactites that gave off a gentle blue radiance. The walls were studded with clusters of mushroom-like growths that pulsed with rhythmic patterns of light. First blue, then green, then purple, like a silent conversation happening all around them. "The Lumini fungi," Professor Zilk's voice echoed slightly in the chamber. "They communicate through bioluminescent pulses, sharing information about nutrients, moisture, and potential threats."
They're talking in lights,
Mika whispered, entranced by the display. "Precisely." Professor Zilk sounded pleased. "These fungi form one of the largest known neural networks in this sector. Some xenobiologists believe they may possess a form of collective consciousness." They ventured deeper into the cave system, the passages sometimes narrowing so much that the larger students had to squeeze through. Taz, a reptilian alien with scaly skin that changed colors with his emotions, currently a nervous yellow-green, kept looking at the ceiling as if expecting it to collapse. "Perfectly safe," Professor Zilk assured them. "These caves have been stable for millennia." The universe, as it often does at such pronouncements, chose that moment to demonstrate its sense of irony. A low rumble vibrated through the stone beneath their feet. Small pebbles skittered down from the ceiling. That's unusual. Professor Zilk's tentacles contracted anxiously within his sphere. According to our surveys, Lunax 3 doesn't experience significant seismic activity. Another rumble, stronger this time. Cracks appeared in the walls. Everyone, back to the entrance! One of the security officers ordered, his hand going to his communication device. Quickly, but calmly. They had only gone a few feet when a violent tremor shook the entire cavern. A large section of the ceiling gave way with a thunderous crack, sending massive chunks of stone crashing down between Mika's group and the exit. In seconds, the passage was completely blocked. Mika found herself on the wrong side of the cave-in with Maz and 3 other students. Taz, whose scales had turned a panicked white, Krill, a luminescent aquatic alien suspended in a hovering water tank, and Jiv, a crystalline being whose faceted body reflected the fungi's light in dazzling patterns. "Professor Zilk!" Taz called out, his voice high with fear. "Can you hear us?" A muffled voice came from the other side of the rockfall. "Are you injured? Is everyone alive?"
We're okay!
Mika shouted back.
Just trapped!
Remain calm. Professor Zilk's voice was barely audible through the stone barrier. We'll contact the ship for emergency excavation equipment. Stay where you are and conserve oxygen. The last words sent a ripple of panic through the trapped students.
How long will that take?
Mika called back. A pause. Several hours at minimum. The ship will need to bring heavy equipment. Another tremor shook the cave. A crack appeared in Krill's water tank, a thin line etching across the transparent material. A drop of water began to seep out.
Professor?
Mika shouted, her voice urgent.
Krill's tank is damaged. We need help faster than several hours.
But the only response was the soft patter of falling pebbles. The communication had been cut off by another minor rockfall. We're on our own, Maz whispered, his large eyes reflecting the blue glow of the fungi. Mika looked around at her fellow students, all terrified, all depending on distant rescue, all from worlds where environmental threats were minimal and predictable. Then she looked at the crack in Krill's tank, which was growing larger by the minute. Something shifted inside her. The fear and self-doubt that had plagued her since arriving at GPA receded, replaced by calm clarity. This wasn't the time to worry about fitting in or being accepted. This was survival. And if there was one thing Earth had taught her, it was how to survive.
No,
she said firmly.
We're not just going to sit here and wait for rescue. We need to find another way out.
The 4 aliens stared at her as if she'd suggested they grow wings and fly through solid rock.
But Professor Zilk said to stay put,
Taz protested, his scales rippling with anxiety.
And that would be fine if we all had hours to spare,
Mika pointed out, nodding toward Krill's tank.
But we don't. We need to move, and we need to move now.
She unzipped her field pack and began rummaging through it.
Maz, do you have a map of the cave system?
Maz blinked, then fumbled with his datapad. Yes, but it's not complete. The survey teams only mapped the main passages.
That's still better than nothing. Jiv, can you use your crystalline structure to detect vibrations in the rock? Maybe we can find where the walls are thinnest?
Jiv's facets rearranged in what might have been surprise.
Yes, theoretically. My lattice can resonate with density variations. Good. Taz, your species has excellent low-light vision, right? You'll be our spotter if the fungi light isn't enough.
Taz's scales shifted to a confused purple.
How did you know that? Xenobiology homework,
Mika said shortly, continuing to dig through her pack. She pulled out a thermal blanket, a water bottle, and a small toolkit, and what looked like a Swiss Army knife on steroids.
And Krill, we need to stabilize your tank right away.
Without waiting for permission, Mika moved to examine the cracked water tank. The fissure was about 6 inches long and widening visibly. Water continued to seep out, forming a small puddle on the cave floor.
I need something waterproof and flexible,
she muttered, then looked down at her own uniform. In one smooth motion, she removed her outer jacket and cut a patch from the lining with her multi-tool.
What are you doing?
Krill's voice came through a translation device on his tank, musical and bubbling with alarm.
Making a temporary seal,
Mika explained, applying the patch over the crack and securing it with a quick-setting adhesive from her toolkit.
It won't hold forever, but it should buy us some time.
She then wrapped the thermal blanket around the tank, creating an additional layer of protection.
If we can find a water source in the caves, we can refill your tank as needed.
The other students watched in stunned silence as Mika worked. When she finished, she straightened up and addressed them all with a calm authority that belied her earlier feelings of inadequacy.
Here's the situation,
she said.
We're trapped. The air is getting thinner, the temperature is dropping, and those flying creatures we saw earlier are starting to take an interest in us.
She pointed to where several bat-like forms were circling at the edge of their light.
We need to find another exit, and we need to do it before Krill's tank fails completely or we run out of breathable air.
But how? Taz asked, his voice trembling.
We don't know if there is another exit. Most cave systems have multiple entrances,
Mika said with more confidence than she felt.
Air has to circulate somehow. Mas, let me see that map.
The map on Maz's datapad showed their current location and about a mile of charted tunnels branching off in 3 directions. Beyond that was nothing but blank space.
Okay.
Mika pointed to one of the passages that led downward.
Water usually finds the lowest point. If there's an underground stream or pool, it might be this way, which would help us refill Krill's tank. But shouldn't we go up?
Jiv asked, her crystalline voice chiming like glass bells.
Exits are usually above, not below. Not always.
Mika shook her head.
Sometimes the easiest way out is to follow the water until it reaches the surface.
Another tremor shook the cave, stronger than before. More cracks appeared in the ceiling. One of the bat creatures swooped closer, revealing a mouthful of needle-like teeth.
We need to move,
Mika said urgently.
Now!
The passage Mika chose narrowed as it descended, forcing them to walk single file. The temperature dropped noticeably, and their breath began to fog in the cool air. The bioluminescent fungi grew sparser, leaving patches of darkness between pools of ghostly blue light. Taz, true to Mika's prediction, proved to have excellent night vision and took the lead, reporting obstacles and turns ahead. Jiv followed, occasionally pressing her crystalline body against the walls to sense vibrations. Mika came next, helping to support Krill's hovering tank, which was becoming unstable as its power reserves dwindled. Maz brought up the rear, keeping watch for the bat creatures that continued to follow at a distance.
The air is getting thinner,
Taz reported, his scales now a worried blue-gray.
My respiratory efficiency has dropped.
Mika noticed it too, a slight lightheadedness, a burning in her lungs when she breathed deeply. For the aliens who required more specific atmospheric conditions, it was clearly worse. Maz's movements had become sluggish, and Jiv's normally crisp edges appeared to be softening.
We'll find better air soon,
Mika promised, though she had no way of knowing if that was true.
Just keep moving.
They emerged into another chamber, smaller than the first, but with a surprising feature. A pool of clear liquid that gave off a faint phosphorescent glow.
Water?
Krill asked hopefully, his own bioluminescence fluctuating weakly. Jiv approached the pool and extended a crystalline appendage to touch the surface.
It appears to be a non-toxic silicone-based liquid, similar enough to water for Krill's purposes. Good enough for me,
Mika said, helping Krill position his tank beside the pool. The patch she'd applied was now bulging outward, barely containing the pressure.
We need to refill your tank without letting what's already inside escape.
What followed was a tense process of carefully removing the section of the tank's upper seal, siphoning in the glowing liquid while maintaining enough pressure to keep Krill submerged. Mika worked methodically, her fingers steady despite the cold and the dwindling oxygen. When she finished, Krill's tank was full again, though the crack remained a concern.
Thank you.
Krill's translated voice rippled with genuine gratitude.
On my world, we learn to fear running out of our native medium above all else. On Earth, we learn that the most dangerous thing is often giving up,
Mika replied, wiping phosphorescent drops from her hands.
Which is why we're going to keep moving.
But as she turned to check on the others, she found Taz slumped against a rock formation, his breathing shallow and his scales a sickly grayish green.
Can't get enough oxygen,
he gasped. Mika knelt beside him, recognizing the symptoms of hypoxia.
Listen to me,
she said, taking Taz's clawed hands in hers.
You need to control your breathing. Slow, deep breaths, like this.
She demonstrated, inhaling slowly through her nose and exhaling through her mouth.
Your body is panicking and taking short, fast breaths, which is making the problem worse. Breathe with me.
Taz studied her with dilated pupils, but followed her example. Slowly, his breathing steadied, and some color returned to his scales.
How did you know to do that?
He asked weakly.
Mountain climbing,
Mika explained.
Earth's atmosphere gets thinner at high elevations. You have to pace yourself and breathe efficiently, or you get altitude sickness.
You climb mountains for fun?
Taz seemed unable to process this concept.
My family climbs Mount Hood every summer,
Mika said, helping him to his feet.
It's practically a tradition.
The other aliens exchanged glances that clearly communicated, what kind of monstrous planet produces beings who voluntarily climb mountains? A sudden screech from the passage behind them cut off further conversation. The bat creatures had grown bolder, venturing closer in the dimmer light.
We need weapons,
Maz squeaked, his fur standing on end. Mika surveyed their surroundings, looking for anything that could be used defensively. Her eyes fell on several long, thin stalactites that had fallen from the ceiling. She broke one off at the base, testing its weight and balance. The material was dense and surprisingly sharp at the tip.
Here!
She handed similar makeshift spears to each of her companions.
Aim for their wings or eyes if they attack.
Jiv examined the stalactite with faceted eyes.
You're suggesting we engage in physical combat? Is that not excessively dangerous? More dangerous than being eaten?
Mika raised an eyebrow.
Besides, they're probably just curious. Most predators avoid prey that puts up a fight.
As if to prove her point, when the first bat creature swooped toward them, Mika thrust her improvised spear upward with a sharp yell. The creature veered away with a startled shriek, rejoining its companions in the shadows.
See? They're looking for easy targets. As long as we show them we're not easy, they'll leave us alone.
The group continued deeper into the cave system, now armed and slightly more confident. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes so narrow they had to squeeze through sideways, other times opening into chambers filled with strange mineral formations. Jiv, who had been pressing her crystalline body against the walls at regular intervals, suddenly froze.
I sense vibration. Rhythmic. Consistent. What kind of vibration?
Mika asked.
Like flowing liquid. A significant volume. An underground river,
Mika realized.
Which means
a way out,
Maz finished, his whiskers quivering with renewed hope. They followed Jiv's directions, turning down a side passage that sloped more steeply downward. The air grew damper, and a faint rushing sound reached their ears. Finally, they emerged onto a ledge overlooking a wide, fast-flowing underground river. The water, or whatever liquid it was, gave off the same phosphorescent glow as the pool they'd found earlier, illuminating the massive cavern in ethereal light.
There,
Taz pointed with a trembling claw.
Downstream, an opening.
In the distance, where the river disappeared around a bend, they could see a patch of different colored light. Not the blue-green phosphorescence of the cave, but the orange-tinted daylight of Lunex 3.
An exit,
Mika breathed, relief washing over her.
But how do we get there? The current looks too strong to swim.
Krill's tank bobbed slightly as he examined the river.
My tank. It floats, and it can support additional weight. If we secure yourselves to it properly, it could serve as a raft.
Mika considered this.
That's risky. If the tank breaks completely.
It is a risk I am willing to take, Krill interrupted. You saved me. Now I can help save all of us. After a brief discussion, they agreed it was their best option. Using strips cut from Mika's jacket and pieces of flexible vine-like fungi, they constructed a crude harness system that would allow them to cling to Krill's tank while keeping their heads above water. Jiv, whose crystalline body was dense enough to sink, would ride atop the tank itself.
Everyone ready?
Mika asked as they prepared to lower themselves into the glowing river. 4 pairs of alien eyes all turned to her and nodded.
On 3,
Mika said.
1, 2, 3.
They pushed off from the ledge. The tank hit the water with a splash, immediately caught by the current. Mika and Maz clung to the sides, half submerged in the glowing liquid, while Taz gripped the rear with his strong claws. Jiv balanced on top, her body acting as a rudder. The river carried them swiftly through the cavern, past towering columns of stone and clusters of glowing fungi. The bat creatures followed for a while, screeching in frustration at their escaping prey, but eventually gave up and disappeared back into the darkness. As they rounded the bend, the exit loomed larger, a jagged hole in the cavern wall where the river flowed out into open air. Bright orange sunlight streamed in, nearly blinding after hours in the dim blue glow of the caves.
We're going to make it!
Maz called out, his voice giddy with relief. The tank bobbed and spun in the current, picking up speed as the river narrowed toward the exit. Mika realized too late what this meant.
Waterfall!
She shouted.
Brace yourselves!
The river plunged out of the cave mouth, and for one heart-stopping moment, they were airborne, suspended above a 30-foot drop. Then gravity reasserted itself, and they plummeted toward a wide pool below. The impact knocked the breath from Mika's lungs. She lost her grip on the tank and tumbled through the glowing water, disoriented and struggling to tell which way was up. Her lungs burned, her ears popped from the pressure. Just as black spots began to dance at the edges of her vision, her head broke the surface, and she gasped in sweet, oxygen-rich air.
Taz!
She called out hoarsely.
Taz! Krill! Jiv!
One by one, her companions surfaced. Maz paddled frantically, his fur plastered to his small body. Taz used his powerful tail to propel himself toward the shore. Krill's tank, miraculously still intact, bobbed nearby with Jiv still perched atop it, somehow having maintained her position throughout the fall. They dragged themselves onto the bank, sodden and exhausted but alive. The orange sunlight of Lunex 3 warmed their skin as they collapsed on the purple vegetation that lined the pool.
We did it,
Maz whispered, his voice filled with wonder.
We actually did it.
No, Taz corrected, his scales now a warm gold that reflected his relief and gratitude.
Mika did it. The Deathworlder saved us all.
Before Mika could respond, a shadow fell across them. She looked up to see a familiar spherical containment unit hovering above, surrounded by the shocked faces of Professor Zilk, the security officers, and the rest of the students.
Impossible.
Professor Zilk's tentacles writhed in disbelief. By all statistical models, you should be dead. Mika struggled to her feet, dripping with glowing liquid, her curly hair wild around her freckled face. She was bruised, scratched, and missing half her uniform jacket, but her green eyes burned with fierce pride.
Statistical models,
she said with a tired smile,
don't account for Deathworlders.
Word of their adventure spread through Galactic Preparatory Academy like wildfire. By the time Mika returned to her dormitory, after a thorough medical examination that left the doctors both horrified and fascinated by human physiology, The entire school was buzzing with revised theories about Earth and its inhabitants. No longer were humans discussed in hushed, fearful tones. Now they were spoken of with a new emotion: respect. The story grew with each retelling. Mika had fought off dozens of cave predators single-handed. She had carried injured aliens for miles through total darkness. She had fashioned advanced tools from raw cave materials. She had held her breath for 10 minutes underwater. Most of these elaborations were wildly exaggerated, but Mika didn't bother correcting them. The truth was impressive enough. She had kept her head in a crisis, used her Earth survival skills, and led everyone to safety. 3 days later, Professor Zilk requested her presence after class. His containment sphere hovered at eye level, tentacles moving in gentle waves that suggested thoughtfulness rather than agitation.
"I've been revising my curriculum," he said without preamble. "Your actions on Lunex 3 have challenged certain academic assumptions about Class 5 species."
Sir?
"It appears," Professor Zilk continued, "that the very environmental pressures we assumed would create merely brutish survivalists have instead produced remarkably adaptable problem solvers. The ability to function under rapidly changing conditions, to improvise with limited resources, to maintain cognitive clarity during crisis. These are not just survival traits, but advanced evolutionary advantages."
Mika suppressed a smile. So, you're saying Earth isn't just a death world? It's a really good training ground?
Professor Zilk's tentacles curled in what might have been the equivalent of a rueful smile.
"I'm saying that perhaps our classification system requires reconsideration. A species should be judged not merely on the harshness of its native environment, but on the adaptations it has developed in response."
As Professor Zilk spoke, Mika realized something had changed in his tone. The fear and clinical detachment were gone, replaced by genuine intellectual curiosity and, could it be, admiration?
"I would like," Professor Zilk concluded, "if you're willing, to include your perspective in future classes. A first-hand account of how Earth's challenges have shaped human capabilities would be educational."
I'd be happy to.
The changes didn't stop there. Mr. Yorn, looking distinctly embarrassed, called Mika to his office to inform her that she was being transferred from remedial classes to the standard curriculum.
"After reviewing your test scores," he mumbled, his nose twitching rapidly, "it appears Earth's educational standards are more robust than previously assumed, particularly in practical problem-solving and adaptive thinking."
Thank you,
Mika said graciously, deciding not to rub it in.
I look forward to the challenge.
Even her dormitory situation improved. Mrs. Trill assigned her a new roommate, a mollusk-like being named Pelk, who communicated by changing colors and who expressed great interest in learning about Earth.
For scientific purposes,
Pelk insisted, though Mika noticed her shell turned a pleased pink whenever Mika shared stories about home. The most surprising change came from her former roommate, Zrixel. The insectoid alien approached Mika in the dining hall one day, antennae quivering with what appeared to be nervous energy.
I want to apologize,
Zrixel said formally.
My reaction to you was based on ignorance and prejudice. The events on Lunex 3 have demonstrated that your Earth adaptations are not a threat, but a valuable trait.
Mika smiled.
Apology accepted. I understand why you were scared. Earth must sound pretty terrifying from an outside perspective. It does, very much so,
Zrixel agreed, her compound eyes refracting light in rainbow patterns.
But I would like to learn more about it, if you're willing to teach me.
And so Mika found herself not with just one friend, but many. Students who had once avoided her now sought her out, particularly for help with practical assignments and survival training. She became something of a celebrity when she demonstrated Earth's skills like starting a fire without technology, purifying water using only basic materials, and identifying potentially edible substances through observation rather than scanning devices. Even Administrator Plex stopped using his personal shield generator around her, though he still maintained a cautious distance.
Simply protocol,
he insisted, all three eyes blinking in sequence.
nothing personal.
At the term's closing ceremony, the entire academy gathered in the grand amphitheater. Administrator Plex stood on the central platform, now without any protective equipment, and addressed the assembled students and faculty.
This term has been one of unexpected discoveries and valuable lessons,
he began.
Not least of which is the reminder that true education requires us to challenge our preconceptions and embrace diversity in all its forms.
His three eyes turned to Mika, sitting in the front row alongside Maz, Taz, Krill, and Jiv, her Lunex 3 team, now her closest friends.
It is my honor to present a special commendation for exemplary application of evolutionary adaptations in crisis situations to Mika Hargreaves of Earth.
A ripple of applause spread through the amphitheater as Mika made her way to the platform. She still felt self-conscious under the gaze of so many alien eyes, but the fear and isolation that had marked her first days at GPA were gone.
Additionally,
Administrator Plex continued,
based on the success of our first Earth exchange student, the Galactic Education Initiative has approved an expansion of the program. Next term, we will welcome 5 more human students to our academy.
This announcement caused a buzz of excited conversation. Mika felt a surge of pride at the thought of helping pave the way for other humans to experience the wider galaxy.
Would you like to say a few words?
Administrator Plex asked, gesturing to the communication node. Mika stepped forward, looking out at the sea of beings, some with tentacles, some with scales, some with crystalline structures, some floating in tanks or hovering on anti-gravity disks, all different, all unique, and all now regarding her not with fear, but with interest and acceptance.
When I first arrived here,
she began,
I was confused by how everyone reacted to me. On Earth, I'm just an ordinary girl who likes hiking and science. I never thought of myself as someone from a Deathworld or as particularly tough or adaptable.
She smiled, tucking a wild strand of curly hair behind her ear.
But being here has helped me see my home planet through new eyes. Earth is challenging. We have deserts and oceans, mountains and canyons, blizzards and heat waves. We've evolved to handle all of that, not because we're monsters, but because we're survivors.
Mika looked at her friends in the front row.
The truth is, every species adapts to its environment in amazing ways. Jiv can analyze molecular structures through direct contact. Krill can generate light from within his own body. Taz can see in almost complete darkness. Maz can hear sounds none of the rest of us can detect. We're all products of our homeworlds, and we all have something valuable to contribute.
She took a deep breath.
I'm proud to be from Earth. I'm proud of what my species has accomplished despite, or maybe because of, our challenging environments. And I'm grateful for the chance to learn from all of you, whose adaptations and abilities are just as remarkable in their own ways.
As Mika concluded her speech, the amphitheater erupted in applause. Even Professor Zilk's tentacles waved enthusiastically within his containment sphere. Later, as students and faculty mingled during the closing reception, Mika overheard a conversation between 2 security officers, including the one who had carried a stun baton during the Lunex 3 field trip.
The Federation military is already inquiring about recruiting Earth graduates, one said. Their adaptability would be invaluable for exploration missions. The Science Directorate, too, replied the other. Apparently, they're rethinking the entire classification system based on the human data.
Mika smiled to herself and turned away, finding her friends waiting for her with various alien beverages and snacks. To the Deathworlder. Taz raised a glass, his scales a warm, friendly orange. Who taught us that survival isn't just about avoiding danger, it's about facing it head on. To Mika, the others chorused, raising their own drinks. As they clinked their glasses together, Mika felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced since leaving Earth. She'd found her place in the galaxy, not by hiding what made her different, but by embracing it. She was Mika Hargreaves, proud Earthling, Deathworld survivor, and now, finally, just another student at the strangest, most wonderful school in the galaxy.